The following slides will provide a brief introduction to the topic of digital content. What is digital content? Digital content is also known as digital media. It comes in many forms ranging from text, audio, video files, graphics, animations, and even images. Digital content is anything that can be published on electronic media. The evolution to digital technology occurred somewhere between the late 1950s and 1970s. A definition of digital content in EU legislation can be found in the 2011 Consumer Rights Directive. In Article 2, paragraph 11 of the directive, it is defined as data which are produced and supplied in digital form. Why is it then important? Well, digital content has become an established fact in our daily lives as households progressively gain access to the internet. This is only increasing as more and more of our needs for information, entertainment, communication, and so forth are met for by digital content. Let us now have a look at the main legal issues involved. Well, first of all, digital content mainly consists of intangible products, and these do not fit well into the traditional private law framework, where many rules were designed for a tangible economic environment, for example, the remedy of the right to demand repair or return of a product. Then there could be problems of contract formation. Think, for example, of the presentation of terms and conditions through click wrap. Is this sufficient to give rise to a legal act? In addition, the problem of ownership with regards to legal content is the creator, the recreator, or the user the owner. Next to that, there are cases of digital copyright infringement. Digital content provides improved possibilities to copy works and disseminate them at low cost. Finally, there are problems regarding unfair terms and conditions. Digital content sometimes contains suspicious provisions, for example, reservations to unilaterally change the terms and conditions of a contract.
In Ireland, there are no rules regarding digital content as such in place at the moment. Today's main rules regard the sale of goods, hire purchase agreements, and contracts for the supply of services. There is also a Consumer Protection Act, which states rules regarding the consumer's right to information. There is also various EU legislation in place, for example, the Consumer Rights Directive. With regards to purchases of digital products, the directive states that anyone buying digital content will be able to get clearer information, including about details on which software and hardware the content works with, as well as information on copyright protections. Consumers will also be able to pull out of purchases of digital content up to the point where downloading or streaming of the content begins. There is, however, some problems with the current rules. There's a misfit since the rules currently in place are made for tangible products, while digital content largely regards intangible products. So historically, legislators and courts have struggled with the approach to digital content and whether it should be classified as a good or as a service, and which corresponding rights consumers should be entitled to. As an example, when you buy intangible digital content, you are not currently protected by consumer legislation in respect of quality. Since there's a problem with the current rules, a proposal for an Irish Consumer Rights Act has been made, which contains a special Part 3 devoted to contracts for supply of digital content. Part 3 creates a new type of contract for supply of digital content, which is distinct from the sale of goods contract. It also provides for a distinct system of rights and remedies, which is similar to those which apply to the contracts for the supply of consumer goods. As a result, the misfit is no longer a problem since there is no need to define the supply of digital content as a good or as a service, and the consumers are given proper legal protection.
Let's now introduce how contracts relating to digital content are regulated in the United Kingdom. Usually, they used to be regulated by general principles of common law. However, it has changed since 2015 when they became a specific type of contract, therefore being regulated under the Consumer Rights Act 2015, more specifically under Chapter 3 of that act. Those rules apply to contracts for the supply of digital content to consumers in exchange for a price, even if that price was paid for other goods, services, and digital content. This chapter also regulates which statutory rights are under a digital content contract. For example, it includes that digital contents need to be of satisfactory quality, meaning that it needs to meet standards that a reasonable person would consider satisfactory. Digital content also needs to be fit for a particular purpose and to be as described by the trader to the consumer. The remedies available are also described in that chapter, for example, the consumer's rights to enforce terms about digital content, the right to repair or replacement, the right to a price reduction, but also the right to refund. Lastly, we can find the rules about compensation and liability. Regarding the differences between Ireland and the United Kingdom, we can see that the proposal in Ireland followed the line of the Consumer Rights Act in the United Kingdom. However, there is still no law in Ireland, which means that there is still a big difference between the two countries. The apparent reason would be that Ireland's rule hasn't kept up with the development of digital content.
Yeah, in order to understand what is the differences between the Germany and the Ireland regarding the digital content, the first thing that we need to understand is to compare them. Firstly, the digital content in the Germany will be explained by following the standards and remedies, terminations, right to damage, the levels of the burden of proof. So the digital content in the Germany grants the right to the consumers regarding the termination of the contract. And we see here that the termination rights of the consumer has been enhanced by the digital content. And digital content also gives rights to consumer to damage. I mean, in case there is a defects of or the faults in the contract, then the consumers are allowed to claim the damage in the contract. As to the reverse of the burden of proof, the provision in existing goods directives, namely the digital content, which states that the consumers' goods are considered to have been defective at the time of delivery. In Germany, there was no digital content provision in the earlier time, so basically the German courts apply the general laws on the sale or the rental items, where the digital content is provided in exchange for the payment. Another very important development provided by the digital content in the Germany was that, like the draft digital content directives, would apply in business to consumer sales. In earlier time, it was very difficult. It was very difficult in early stage, and the startup capital for the digital content companies in Ireland, it was very difficult to obtain. Ireland's traditional media sector is not well developed in the adoption and the use of digital technologies, and to date has not significantly acted as a catalyst for digital content industry growth. And these are basically the differences in the perspective of the digital content between the Germany and the Ireland. So we can also mention one of the very important information, which is as following, to develop a world-class digital content industry based on the targeted developments of a number of clusters at the intellectual property end of the market, namely enabling technology and high-value content and application.